You know, Diddy bought his son a Bentley. Maybe, you know, he could buy you one also while you're
He
out.
got me a Lamborghini.
Oh, well, that's nice.
I haven't gotten it yet, though.
Yeah, I know. When is that coming, that Lamborghini? We talked about this last time.
He had the Lamborghini for a day or two, and he had access to the house, and he knows better than to be talking about the things that he does with Big Brother Puff on national television.
Joe Rogan has always been known as someone who doesn't back down. He's built a career on asking hard questions and having open conversations no matter how uncomfortable. But in one emotional episode of his podcast, Rogan found himself shaken in a way no one expected. What started as a regular show ended with Joe wiping tears from his eyes, completely heartbroken by what he had just learned. At the center of it all was a name known around the world, Justin Bieber. And behind the scenes of Bieber's early career, there was another powerful name, Sean Diddy Combs. When Joe dove into the details, he uncovered a pattern that made his blood run cold.
So check this out, yo. Justin, you ever seen the movie 48 Hours? Right now, he's having 48 hours with Diddy, him and his boy. They're having the times of their lives, like, you know, where we hanging out and what we doing. We can't really disclose. But it's definitely a 15-year-old's dream. You know, I have been given custody of him. You know, he signed to Usher.
I'm signed to Usher.
I had legal guardianship of Usher when you know he did his first album. I did Usher's first album. I don't have legal guardianship of him, but for the next 48 hours, he's with me. So
It all began when Joe stumbled upon a clip of Diddy speaking about Bieber from years ago. In the video, Diddy smiled as he talked about spending 48 hours with the teenage star. He called it a learning experience and said it was a dream for a 15-year-old. But something about his tone and the way he described the time made Rogan uneasy. Why was a grown man spending days alone with a young singer? Where were the parents, the managers, the people responsible for protecting him? Joe paused the video and said it out loud. Something wasn't right. That single moment sent Rogan on a deep investigation. He began collecting videos, contracts, travel records, and statements from people who had worked around Bieber during that time. The deeper he looked, the more concerned he became. He uncovered travel schedules that made no sense for someone so young. Bieber was being moved from one private estate to another, kept away from his usual team. And in some of these locations, Diddy was the one calling all the shots.
So many horrific accusations, though, involving young singers, like children.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
It's insane.
He makes R. Kelly look like a decent guy.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
It is crazy. And meanwhile, the guy was like hanging out with Oprah, hanging out with Obama.
Jay-Z,
Everybody.
I'm sure the Clintons were there at some point.
Maybe Bill.
Because I think if a victim comes out against Usher, it'll show how egregious this shit is. Because if he can be a predator, then anybody can be a predator.
Can't smile in your face the whole time.
You feel what I'm saying? Like, people look at Usher, they don't see that. They're not seeing the victim. They're not seeing that boy that got rushed to the hospital. They're not seeing what the intentions was in his heart when he took Justin Bieber there.
Oh.
Let's be honest. He took Justin Bieber there. Diddy had been trying to get to Bieber for a minute. And his management was backing him off. But it wasn't until Usher took over management and had guardianship and gave temporary guardianship to the diddler for 48 hours.
One of the most painful discoveries came in the form of a letter. It was handwritten by Bieber when he was just 15. The letter was short and simple. In it, Justin said he was tired. He said the schedule was overwhelming and that he wanted to go home. Reading it, Joe stopped speaking for several seconds. The words were full of stress and sadness, and it became clear that Bieber had felt trapped. Joe looked into the camera and said this was no way for a child to be treated, especially one in the care of adults who claimed to be mentors. Then came the video footage. A hallway camera captured Bieber walking down a corridor at 3 a.m. He was carrying a guitar, his shoulders slouched, followed by 2 assistants. He didn't look like a pop star heading to a performance. He looked like a kid who hadn't slept. On the wall, through an open door, a whiteboard listed the rules of the weekend. No phone use, strict rehearsal times, and early wake-up calls. Joe studied the image in silence. The rules weren't about music education, they were about control.
And good luck when you're older. You know, Justin Bieber had a post the other day on his Instagram talking about all the drugs that he did when he was younger and how much it fucked him up. And now he's got a relationship with the Lord, and he's got, you know, he's married, and he's trying to be a normal person.
Yeah.
But he's struggling with the fact that he was insanely famous when he was a kid.
Rogan's team started receiving calls and messages from people who had worked in the industry. Former assistants, tour staff, and even some junior executives began sharing similar stories. They said there were always rumors about how Diddy handled young artists, but most people were too scared to speak up. Some claimed Diddy created focus weekends where kids would be isolated. Others said communication with managers or parents was often restricted. Joe listened carefully to each story, and the pattern became impossible to ignore. Bieber himself never directly named names in his social media posts, but his words now carried new meaning. He had written about struggling with pressure, feeling overwhelmed, and losing his sense of identity. He said he had been pushed too far and had tried to find healing through faith and relationships. Joe read those words aloud on the podcast, his voice filled with emotion. Now knowing what had happened behind the scenes, the posts felt like cries for help.
And then you have them come to audition for you, right?
Actually, a few people. My wife at the time.
Right.
It also was Perry Reed, L.A. Reid's first wife.
You were all sitting in a room somewhere.
We were in a room.
Yeah.
And I showed her the video. And Perry says, "Are you crazy? You better get down there and meet this kid right now. He's amazing."
When all these pics come out and all this stuff with Bieber's big penis, are you the mastermind behind that? Say, listen, show off your big penis and people will come to those concerts. Or are you sitting there?
Is that the kind of manager he's doing?
Usher, are you sitting down with him and saying, yeah, show your or leave it in your pants? I mean, do you sit him down and say, look, part of this is PR,
Hey,
man.
by the way, he does have a brain of his own.
Yeah, but were you shocked at the size of his penis?
Hey, listen, he has a mind of his own. What he chose to do with his penis is his prerogative. He's managing that aspect of his life.
But Usher, is somebody...
I have nothing to do with Justin Bieber's private parts, man.
Flown out to Atlanta by a manager. His name's Scooter Braun. Flown out to Atlanta just to meet with him and meet different producers and different people. I was actually going to meet Jermaine Dupri at his studio. And who rolls up? Usher in his Range Rover. Rolls up. And I was like, "Is that who I think it is?" And Scooter was like, "Yeah." And so I ran up to him and I was like, Usher, I love your songs. You want me to sing you one?" And he was like, "Let's just go inside, little buddy. It's cold out." So the politest possible way he could say no, he did. And I was like, wow, he just turned me down. And I was a little disappointed. He had to go into a studio session, so I was like, whatever. And a week later, he actually watched my videos with my manager. And was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I let him sing? So flew me back to Atlanta where I got to meet him again. And he wanted to sign me. But there was something else.
Justin Timberlake, right?
Yes, Justin Timberlake also wanted to sign me. It was like kind of like, what happened was Justin Timberlake and Usher both went into a ring and boxed it out. And the outcome was Usher. I think it was a TKO.
As Joe connected more dots, he turned his attention to the industry. He asked why no one stepped in. Where were the safeguards? Why were these young stars treated like products instead of people? He blamed not just Diddy, but an entire system that allowed power to go unchecked. He said, this wasn't about canceling anyone, it was about accountability and making sure this never happened to another kid again. The fallout was immediate. Brands that had once worked with Diddy began pulling out. A sneaker line canceled its collaboration. Streaming services started reviewing his catalog. Advertisers paused campaigns. Diddy's public image, once seen as legendary, started to crack. But for Joe, this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. He said the music world needed to face its problems, not hide them.
What's going on with you guys? Are you working together?
I'm not. I mean, I think that we've become friends in a strange way, you know?
Like Robin Big.
Yeah, it's like, exactly.
I'm Big and you're Robin.
Yeah. To a lot of us, he's like a little brother. You know what I'm saying? He's not afraid to call and ask for advice. He's somebody that, in the industry-wise, the record industry is a strong family, and he's somebody that, you know, we definitely have our arms around, and we want to protect him because he's such genuinely a nice person besides his talent. You know what I'm saying? He's one of the greatest kids that you could ever know.
Months ago, I was really struggling mentally and emotionally, and just there was so many things that were adding up, and I wasn't able to enjoy any of the things that I owned.
That stuff's not gonna matter to you.
None of the actual things did anything because I was so hurt and I was so confused and I was so sick and there was all these things, and I was like, I can't, you know, there's like, you just can't, like you said, you can't enjoy the actual physical, tangible, like, things that money offers, right?
In a quiet moment near the end of the podcast, Joe picked up one more report. It was a summary from a mental health expert who had worked with young performers. The report spoke of stress, anxiety, and feelings of isolation among child stars. It mentioned patterns of emotional burnout and a lack of safe support systems. Joe folded the paper and placed it on the desk. Then he made a promise. Every dollar earned from that podcast episode would go to organizations that protect and support young artists. Joe then outlined changes that he believed should be made in the music industry. He said young performers should always have a guardian or manager present when traveling. Contracts should be reviewed by child advocates. Mental health check-ins should be part of every tour, and most of all, the culture of silence needed to end. If someone sees a problem, they must speak up. The safety of young artists must come before record sales or fame.
I always say this about Justin Bieber. When people hear about him going insane, like, of course he's going insane. You have no idea what it would be like to be him and to be 17 years old. And girls literally trying to break into his house. They're coming down chimneys. They're flying in on parachutes. They're doing anything they can. They just want to be around him. You want him to be normal?
Oh, man, poor guy.
What's up, man? You good?
I'm good. How are you?
All right, young brother, everything's good? Selling out arenas and everything? Starting to act different, huh? You ain't been calling me and hanging out the way we used to hang out.
Well, I mean, you tried to get in contact with me, you know, through all my, partners and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But you never really got my number, so.
Right. Okay.
My number?
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you my number.
Yeah.
It's 555.
Yes. Okay.
5555.
Okay. 55. You heard that?
Yeah.
Okay. As the episode wrapped up, Joe spoke directly to viewers. He asked them to pay attention. He said that what happened to Bieber could easily happen to someone else if people kept looking away. He challenged other celebrities, producers, and fans to speak up and demand change. You see, his voice was calm, but firm. This isn't about taking someone down, he said. It's about lifting the next generation up. News of the podcast spread fast. Clips were shared across platforms. Fans expressed support for Justin and shock over the details Joe revealed. Other celebrities started speaking up, confirming that they too had seen troubling behavior in the past. People began to wonder how many more stories were out there, hidden by contracts and silence. Diddy, meanwhile, remained mostly quiet. A few vague statements were made through representatives, but the damage had already been done. His reputation was no longer bulletproof. What once was seen as power and charm now looked more like manipulation and secrecy. Joe's podcast had shined a light into places the industry didn't want anyone to look, and the public was finally paying attention.
The you of then was on a path of self-destruction. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would have, for sure, 100%. Yeah. It would have been no bueno. It was bad. I don't know if I'd be alive, for sure. It was dark. So I'm very, very grateful to have influences in my life that have played a huge part in me seeing their relationship with Jesus and their relationship with their wives and their relationship with their kids and saying that's what I want. But I want to definitely tell my story so that if that resonates to anybody, that they can hopefully. But yeah, just protecting those moments because people take for granted encounters and
he did an interview back in 2020 with Zane Lowe. I think this was on Apple Music. And he was speaking about another young artist that was coming up, Billie Eilish, and Eilish. And he was basically speaking about how he wanted to protect her because she was now another young person, a rising artist in the industry. And sort of out of nowhere, he became quite overcome with emotion.
Bieber continued his journey toward healing. He focused on music that felt honest. He leaned into his marriage and his faith. And while he never confirmed or denied the exact stories Joe shared, he did thank his fans for their support. In one quiet post, he simply wrote, "Thank you for believing in me." That was all he needed to say. Joe later said that this episode was one of the hardest he'd ever recorded. He admitted it was tough to read those documents and hear those stories, but he also said it was necessary. He hoped it would lead to real change, and he reminded everyone listening that protecting young talent wasn't just a music industry issue, it was a human issue. The story didn't end with that one podcast. It became the start of something bigger. Conversations about mentorship, power, and responsibility began happening in other areas: film, television, sports. More people began speaking out. And slowly, the idea of silent suffering started to fade. In its place was something better: truth, support, and accountability.
We had seen these videos of Justin Bieber being handed over to him at age 15. Great job. Great job. And for his weekend with Diddy camp. I mean, we don't know, but it certainly looks like Justin Bieber is still suffering the fallout from whatever happened to him as he was coming up the ranks of the music world. It really doesn't seem worth it. I mean, I'd love to hear more from his camp about what's real, because it's clear he's suffering. We just don't know from what. And what mother out there would give her 15-year-old boy over to a grown man who's in the rap industry for a weekend with Diddy camp without other adult supervision?
Anyways, I want to also just show you this montage. This is a montage that was shared by Evie Magazine. They do great work on their TikTok of Justin Bieber, again, just 15 years old, in Hollywood, surrounded by a bunch of adults. And you let me know if any of this registers to you as normal. Take a listen.
Wow! I feel violated right now. Wow.
Lean into me again. You smell amazing. How old are you?
Thank you.
How old are you?
I'm 16. I'll be 17 in like 2 weeks.
I don't ever remember smelling that good at 16. That was bad.
Yeah.
Wow, look at your eyes. Look at what a beautiful face. All right, now it's time to...
As the music world watched, Joe made one last statement that summed up everything. He said, "Success should be something that helps people grow, not something that locks them in a room and shuts the door." Those words stayed with viewers long after the episode ended. What happened to Justin Bieber can't be changed, but the way we respond to his story can change everything. Joe Rogan turned his platform into a spotlight, and now the truth is out. And once the truth is out, it can't be ignored. The future of the industry depends on what people do next. Will they speak up? Will they stay silent? Will they protect the next young star from going through the same pain? That's the question. And now, the world is watching. After Joe Rogan's powerful podcast shook the industry, the aftershocks were felt across Hollywood, the music world, and the internet. What had started as one man reading documents and reacting to a disturbing past had turned into a full-blown movement. Fans weren't just upset, they were furious. People who had grown up listening to Justin Bieber began questioning everything they thought they knew about the music business. And most of all, they started taking a closer look at Diddy. Suddenly, the spotlight that once praised him for success was now focused on the shadows he had tried to keep hidden. Media outlets began running headlines about the allegations Joe had brought to light. Talk shows debated whether young stars like Bieber had been protected or pushed into situations that damaged them long term. Journalists reached out to past employees of Diddy's companies, trying to uncover more details. Some people still stayed silent, but more than ever before, individuals began to speak up. Old friends, studio assistants, and even low-level interns began sharing what they saw behind closed doors. One former assistant said she remembered Justin being driven to properties late at night with no clear schedule. She said instructions were always vague and only a few people were allowed to interact with him. He looked exhausted all the time, she said. You could tell he didn't want to be there. Another person recalled how team members were warned not to interfere with Diddy's mentorship sessions. They were told that it was industry standard and that questioning the process would get them fired. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan refused to let the conversation die. In the days after the episode aired, he posted several updates. He spoke with musicians, activists, and mental health professionals who were all demanding change. One guest, a former child star, told Joe that these kinds of experiences weren't rare. She said the industry has a history of allowing powerful people to have too much access to young talent without enough rules or oversight. Joe nodded and said that the worst part wasn't just what happened, but how long it had been allowed to continue. Support for Justin Bieber also grew louder. Social media lit up with people saying they had more respect for him now than ever before. People said they finally understood why Bieber had struggled in the spotlight, canceled tours, and gone silent for stretches. "We didn't know what he was going through," one fan tweeted. "We just thought he was being difficult. Turns out he was just trying to survive." Others started sharing old interviews where Bieber looked uncomfortable when talking about his early career, saying those moments now carried a much heavier meaning. Even Bieber's team made subtle moves. Without naming names, his reps confirmed that he had gone through difficult experiences as a teen and that he was grateful for those now standing with him. Hailey Bieber also posted a quiet message thanking people for showing her husband compassion. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. The Biebers were aware of the support and likely grateful that the truth was finally being seen. As this wave of awareness grew, pressure began to mount on other celebrities who had been close to Diddy. People started asking, who knew? Names of famous collaborators and former friends were mentioned online. Fans asked why they hadn't spoken up. Some began distancing themselves, scrubbing social media mentions, or quietly removing photos. Others released vague statements about supporting young artists and standing against mistreatment. But Joe Rogan called that out directly. "Don't just say you care," he said on his follow-up show. "Tell the truth. If you saw something, say something." At the same time, entertainment lawyers and advocates began calling for industry-wide reform. One nonprofit launched a petition for new rules to protect underage artists. They demanded limits on work hours, access to trusted adult representatives at all times, and routine mental health screenings. They also asked for a public registry of artist managers and their histories, something similar to background checks in schools. Joe supported it fully, urging his audience to sign and share it. "If this helps even one kid avoid what Justin went through," he said, "then it's worth it." Diddy's response remained quiet, but it didn't help. His silence only fueled more questions. Eventually, his team issued a short statement denying any wrongdoing and accusing people of twisting the facts. But the internet wasn't buying it. Every denial only brought more attention to the original story. New YouTube videos analyzed the situation, podcasts dug into old footage, and Reddit threads tracked every piece of evidence. It became harder and harder for Diddy to avoid the spotlight, and public opinion began turning fast. Corporate brands started evaluating their partnerships, clothing lines backed out of promotional deals, music platforms stopped promoting older tracks, even venues began second-guessing appearances or retrospectives involving Diddy's legacy. What was once seen as untouchable had now become controversial. Some people still defended him, but they were quickly drowned out by the growing tide of support for the artists who had suffered under that system. One of the most powerful moments came when a group of former teen artists released a joint video thanking Joe Rogan for telling the truth. They said that for years, people like them had kept quiet out of fear. But seeing someone with Joe's platform speak so honestly gave them the strength to finally share their stories. "You showed us we weren't alone," one of them said. Joe reposted the video and called it the proudest moment of his career. As momentum grew, talk of legislation started. Lawmakers in California began discussing a bill that would require stricter rules for underage performers. The bill would include detailed contracts, mandatory supervision, and mental health training for people working with minors in the industry. Joe brought legal experts onto his show to break it down and help listeners understand how they could support the bill. He said it was time to stop pretending the entertainment world was special and start treating it like every other workplace. Behind the scenes, more victims began organizing. A former child singer reached out to Joe's team and shared her own story of pressure, control, and emotional manipulation during her time in the business. Her account was different from Bieber's, but it echoed the same themes. Young artists being treated like products, not people. Joe shared her story anonymously on his next show, giving a voice to those still too afraid to speak publicly. The media began referring to it as the Bieber effect. The ripple of truth caused by one story finally coming to light, and that ripple was turning into a wave. A major music magazine published a cover story investigating past deals Diddy had made with teen performers. Another platform released a long-form documentary exploring the darker side of fame. And through it all, Joe stayed consistent. "This is about protecting the next generation," he said. "This is about changing the culture." Meanwhile, Bieber himself kept a low profile. He didn't appear on talk shows or give interviews, but he did post more reflective messages. One simply said, "Healing isn't loud." Another included a photo of him in the studio, smiling with friends. Fans said it was the first time in a long time he looked truly at peace. That image became a symbol of the movement, not just survival, but growth. Joe continued inviting experts onto his show. Child psychologists spoke about the long-term effects of being overworked at a young age. Industry veterans admitted that many executives ignored warning signs. Even former security guards came forward, sharing how they were told not to question certain schedules or routines. The more stories came out, the more the pattern became impossible to deny. Eventually, pressure reached legal levels. Former employees started filing lawsuits. A few artists began to explore legal options for contracts they had signed when they were underage. Investigators started contacting people named in old documents. Diddy's empire, once considered stable, now looked like it was standing on shaky ground. Through it all, Joe remained a steady voice. He reminded his audience that the goal wasn't to destroy, but to rebuild. "We're not trying to take anyone's success away," he said. "We're trying to make sure success doesn't come at the cost of a kid's well-being." As the months went on, more positive changes began taking shape. Studios started holding workshops for their staff on how to interact with young artists. Mentorship programs were redesigned to include mental health checks. And artists, both young and old, started speaking more openly about their boundaries and rights. The story Joe shared became more than just a podcast episode. It became a movement, and that movement showed no signs of slowing down.